but we want to get to the calendar as quickly as possible without attracting too much attention. Fortunately, we got mist, so they can't see us from the lookout point, because that's what they do at the moment. When they see you messing around here, they send the guards out to come and arrest you.
Why are you occupying Adam's calendar?
Because it belongs to the people. It's a sacred site that the world should know about. They sent us over from Wall Street.
Because this is where it begins.
This is our assignment. This is our mission. This is the root of mission. To free the sacred sites and make them available to the people for all time. It really just started here.
And so Adam's calendar was a central point to send all these energies to that were generating here, because that's where they needed to transmutate the gold and get it off this planet. It's possible they were teleporting it to a big mothership or a spaceship from where they would then take it out, or to a distant planet. I don't know. That's
Okay, who are you and why are you occupying Adam's calendar?
I'm William Brown, and I'm occupying Adam's calendar so that the knowledge and information of this site can be shared with the rest of the world and it won't be blocked off, and people can understand this is part of the human heritage worldwide, globally.
And what specific message do you have to the people of the world about what Adam's calendar is? What is there here?
Adam's calendar is it's part of the advanced technology that existed in ancient times. This looks like stones standing upright, and people see the stones and they think it's primitive. But this is an advanced technology. This is using the technology of nature. It's using sound modulation for a variety of purposes. And when we come to understand the advanced technology that's present here, that was being used here, we can advance our own knowledge. And it's part of our birthright. This is coming full circle. We originated here, and we're coming full circle and going into our future from this location.
And what do you understand about the civilization that constructed Adam's calendar and our current DNA?
Well, they were a somewhat advanced civilization, not much more advanced though than our current civilization. They had taken that step into advanced knowledge. They were a space traveling civilization. But understanding the relationship of frequency to the DNA code, because the DNA has a light encoded strand. This is an electromagnetic frequency. So understanding the frequency, they could use sound modulation to alter the function and structure of the DNA. They can rearrange it, and it doesn't require any kind of physical manipulation. And so this spacefaring civilization were able to create humans, a hybrid species, at this site, at this location, using this technology.
And what do you see your presence and our presence of Occupy Adam's calendar today? What is going to be the outcome of this?
It's a historical event. It really is. We're part of the group who is bringing this information into the public domain. And Michael Tellinger, of course, is the pioneer of bringing this to the attention of the world. And we're here to let them know that this is part of the future of humanity. So this is a historical event. We're here to bring this knowledge to the world.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So it was actually through an empirical investigation of human the human genetic lineage, and what's called technically phylogeny. So looking at human phylogeny, it was actually from an empirical investigation that I came to the conclusion that the human species was the product of genetic engineering. And it was actually while I was getting my master's degree at New York University. It was my final year, and I was taking a systems biology class. But it was just as a project that I designed an experiment that could identify the genetic regions of the genome that made humans different from chimpanzees. So what were the genetic elements of the genome that were different between humans and chimpanzees? But it was actually, to my great surprise, during this research that I realized, I came to find that there are no genetic differences. Well, the genetic differences between chimpanzees and humans are negligible. So for me at the time, this was astounding because I was firmly rooted in the theory, the ideology really, that the origin of all species was due to Darwinian evolution. But there is no Darwinian evolution to account for the presence of human beings, of the human species. Because the differences in the gene coding regions between humans and what is ostensibly their closest relative is negligible. There's more difference as far as protein coding genes. There's more difference between a human and another human than between that same person and a chimpanzee. It obviously wasn't Darwinian evolution that could explain the origin of humanity. So being an open investigator, I began to look for an explanation of how the human species originated. And one very possible explanation is that human species come from another planet. They have an extraterrestrial orogenesis. But, and this is posited by many people, especially native cultures. So if you look at indigenous cultures, their mythos all explain the origin of their culture or their people coming from the stars. I mean, time and time again, the Mayans, Zulus, Hopis, where I'm at in Hawaii, the mythology, the mythos is that they came from the Pleiadian star system in stellar canoes. But I think that this is very allegorical and metaphorical. Because if you look at the empirical evidence, the human species actually shares a high degree of genetic similarity with almost all of the existing animal kingdom here on the planet. So when the native Hawaiians say that they came here in stellar canoes from the Pleiadian star system, I think what they're saying is that on a soul level, they came here as star beings on a soul level and incarnated into the human form that was pre-existing. So you have this high degree of genetic similarity among all the species on the planet. This in itself isn't too surprising because what is life is probably very homogeneous throughout the universe. All probably third-dimensional beings share the same kind of genetic constitution, more or less. But again, empirically, the high degree of similarity between humans and chimpanzees, there's negligible, only 1% difference between the gene coding regions. It supports the idea that we are indeed part of a family of beings that existed on planet Earth, the hominids. But again, you don't have any evidence for an evolutionary process that could account for the emergence of Homo sapiens from this primate family, from this the great ape lineage. Even within the fossil record, there's no gradation between, say, Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. Evolutionary process, there should be intermediaries between the fossilized remains of Homo erectus and the fossilized remains of early Homo sapiens. There is none. The reason is because there is no evolutionary link between the two. So what the evidence shows is that a very plausible explanation was intervention outside genetic engineering of a pre-existing hominid species into the human lineage, the human race. So that scientifically, that's a plausible explanation. But there's also historical evidence, historical precedents from the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, the story of Genesis, even the story of Genesis within the Bible itself talks about the Nephilim. And within, the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, it talks about the Anunnaki, which are probably one and the same, just different names for the same being of extraterrestrial, stellar entities, beings. And this is borne out again and again in indigenous mythos. So, the skeptic tends to disregard these mythologies, but that's because of their actual gullibility. They take them as literal, word for word, in which case they're not very plausible. But again, it's a metaphorical or an allegorical explanation of what happened, because these stories were written for a people who didn't have any kind of advanced scientific understanding to explain things that take a advanced understanding of the nature of genetics, the solar system, etc. But so the evidence all points towards the genetic engineering by an extraterrestrial civilization of a pre-existing hominid species to produce the human lineage. But that being said, the more I've investigated this, the more I've researched it, even the pre-existing hominid species, I don't believe came into being through natural processes. even what you could consider the evolutionary process itself, which to some extent it does occur. There is evolution, but not completely in the way that it's described scientifically. It's not in any way a blind process. It's an intelligent process, and there are intelligences driving and guiding the process of evolution itself. So even the initial orogenesis of the hominoids, the hominid species on Earth, even this was intervention. This was a creation by intelligences, genetic engineering experiment to create a hominoid species. And this is probably occurring on very high levels of existence. This is most likely extremely advanced, higher dimensional beings that are guiding and directing this process, which is in many regards an experiment. There's many levels to it that, you know, kind of go outside the scientific explanations into a more metaphysical understanding of what's going on. Because really at that point, you're not really, you're talking about, you know, very metaphysical concepts. Because, I mean, I don't know if you want me to stay more focused on the scientific progression of the emergence of the human species, or because I mean, you know, there's also a great deal of evidence from astronomical observations, such as the asteroid belt, which is clearly the remnants of a planet, a disintegrated planet. And again, this has a historical explanation, especially within the Sumerian cuneiform tablets for the planet Marduk. But even further, you have direct evidence of a hominoid species on Mars, a very human-like species on Mars. And so there's obviously been this human-like experiment going on in this solar system for a long time. And I think that it originally started on Marduk, or what is now the remnants that are the asteroid belt. That obviously didn't go so well, as the planet is completely destroyed. And higher intelligences probably set up another hominoid race on Mars, where the souls from Marduk were transferred to Mars. Again, that didn't go so well, as Mars is now, you know, to a large extent, not a very hospitable planet. And so, third attempt, humanoids are human like species was created on Earth for the transfer for a third attempt. So, you know, metaphysically, this is so that the soul can have a human experience for, you know, probably a multitude of reasons.
Right. Now, yeah. Could I just, now, from a DNA and genetic point of view, because you mentioned very highly advanced ETs as doing this, and there's the 12-strand DNA and the 2-strand DNA and a devolution down. Do you mean that initially humans were created as a 12-strand DNA species? And what does 12-strand DNA species mean, if that's the case?
Indeed, the initial hominoids. Now, the fossil record shows, as well as the genetic fossil record, which is another thing entirely, this shows that the hominoid lineage with the great apes goes back about 8 million years.
Okay.
For a large period of time, millions of years, there were hominoids on the planet evolving somewhat naturally. They all had 12-stranded DNA.
Oh.
These higher level intelligences, they created the hominoid lineage with the express intent of spiritual evolution.
Right.
So the 12-stranded DNA is the interface, the conscious interface, well, the interface between the physical and the conscious level of spirit.
Right.
What you have is the express intent by these higher level intelligences to create a species that can undergo spiritual evolution. And that requires a 12-stranded DNA complement. 12-strand DNA is actually the normal configuration of life, of living beings. So to get to the human species, though, so the fossil record, the genetic fossil record, shows that the human lineage really, Homo sapiens emerged on the planet about 300,000 years ago.
Okay.
So the initial creation of the human species using the pre-existing Homo erectus DNA, they had 12-stranded DNA.
I see.
And we have 12-stranded DNA now. It's just been disconnected.
I see.
So what occurred is, again, this requires multiple sources of information. From the historical context of what's been recorded, but also channeled information.
Okay.
Which I have found is highly, highly informative.
Okay.
And very reliable.
Okay.
I derive a great deal of information from channeled sources, which are largely extraterrestrial beings.
Yeah.
From higher dimensional levels.
Okay.
Giving us information.
This is information as to genetics, which then you check out
exactly.
with regard to genetic science.
Exactly.
Okay. Good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For instance, a great deal of channeled information says that the human lineage, the great ape family, the hominoids, were a genetic engineering creation. So I went and I began to investigate what genetic elements could be involved in creating the hominoids, the great apes. And it's there. There is a specific element that it seems to be almost predominantly responsible for what makes hominoids hominoids, what makes humans humans. And it shows a high degree of engineering. When I first found this genetic element, it's called the ALU element, and it's part of the non-coding DNA. Because remember, I said that all genes within the great ape family are nearly identical. The differences are negligible. They're 1 to 5%. So it's not the genes. It's the non-coding DNA. So this non-coding DNA, this ALU element, shows a high degree of engineering. In fact, its presence within the genome can't really be explained by natural processes. So there's this element that was clearly engineered and produced, and it has a multitude of effects within the biological system, modulating gene expression, controlling protein levels, so how cells and tissues function. But the thing is, this ALU element, it's only found within primates. It's exclusive to chimpanzees, humans, and other great apes and the primate lineage. So, you know, how did genetic engineering take place? It's through genetic elements like the ALU element, which were taken, engineered molecularly, and inserted into the genome to create hominoids. This was all done millions of years ago by higher level intelligences. And of course, they're working on the morphogenetic level as well. A great deal of the manipulation has to do with morphogenetic, morphic resonance, creating conformations that tune in to specific morphogenetic templates. And these higher level intelligences are very adept at this process. So you get to the creation of Homo sapiens by the Anunnaki. They take the pre-existing hominoid species, and there's a reason they do this. It's uniquely adapted to the planet. It's had a long time to equilibrate to the environment of Earth and to form a harmonic resonance with the morphogenetic template of Earth itself. That's important if you're going to have a worker species on the planet. So the Anunnaki, with the intent of creating a worker race. And, you know, this is, again, part of historical explanation as well as channeled information. But they take the Homo erectus, which has 12-stranded DNA. In this sense, Homo erectus was a highly evolved species. Now, you look at the remnants, and it looks primitive. It's what were they? You know, when we look at what they were doing, you see stone chippings, etc. But the reason Homo erectus is no longer around is because they've ascended. You see, it's a highly evolved spiritual species. And really, when we talk about advanced, an advanced evolutionary species, it's really, the advanced is on a spiritual level. It's not how much ecological destruction you can wreak through building cities and atomic weapons. Really, a highly advanced civilization is about a close connection with nature and living in harmony. So, you know, the Homo erectus, while we look back and we see what we think of as primitive behaviors, were highly advanced. And the reason is because this 12-stranded DNA matrix. So the Anunnaki probably attempted to utilize the Homo erectus as a worker species, but this high level of consciousness, they're not controllable. Furthermore, they can procreate on their own. they're not reliant on the Anunnaki in any way. So the Anunnaki are going to create a worker species that does not have conscious connection with higher dimensional levels. So what is the 12-stranded DNA? Initially, I thought that what was being described was actual 12 physical strands of DNA. But I've actually come to begin to regard most of the strands as non-physical. Because I think each strand corresponds to a dimensional level. Because that's how the information, the frequency from these dimensional levels are transduced into the biological organism for our physical perception, the perception by our physical mind. So I think only 3 of the strands are even physical in nature at all. So they're largely energetic filaments. So what occurs is you have as I've said, the Anunnaki take the Homo erectus and they clone the species, and they clone it so that they can mix in their genetic material with that of Homo erectus. Now, our genes are probably completely similar, except for variations that have occurred over time, to those in Homo erectus. What's different is our non-coding segments of DNA. Now that constitutes 98% of our genome. Most of that is extraterrestrial DNA, in that most of our non-coding DNA comes from the Anunnaki genome. We are a hybrid species of Homo erectus and the Nephilim, the Anunnaki. So they take the Homo erectus, they hybridize the DNA with their own. Now that non-coding DNA is going to make us more similar, in fact, to the Nephilim. Then this cloned embryo is implanted into a Nephilim female, where it develops and is birthed. That is the creation of the Homo sapiens, of the human species. There's through cloning, genetic engineering, the hybridization of the extraterrestrial species with Homo erectus. And so in addition to having us clone, this was the standard method by which human beings were produced, is actually cloning. As a worker species, we were infertile, incapable of actually procreating ourselves. So for probably many thousands of years, human species were created completely through cloning, which actually involved the Nephilim females giving birth to human beings. But there's some actual technical things that can be said at this point about this process. Because when we do cloning, we use very physical means. We use actual molecules and enzymes to induce the cloning. And the genetic engineering, so recombining the DNA, etc. A more advanced science would use the intrinsic frequency of these biomolecules in order to arrange them. So if you look at, again, where on earth was this genetic manipulation undertaken, it was in the Abzu, as described by the cuneiform tablets, which Michael Tellinger has shown is Adam's calendar, the lost city of Enki. Now, as you know, I had the extreme privilege of visiting this historical site. And not only does it match the date at which the genetic engineering began to produce Homo sapiens, which is 250 to 300,000 years ago, it is a technological facility. It's none of what I saw is actual physical habitations. It's a technological facility that was producing and harnessing acoustic technology. They were using sound production and vibrations in a very specific manner, probably for most of the technological processes that they were undergoing. But Adam's calendar that we visited is said by Credo Mutwa and others to be psychics as well, which is another highly verifiable source of information, to be the site at which the first cloning took place. And at this site, they had the capacity to use frequency modulation to do all of the genetic engineering, as well as the creation of the infertile human beings. So how would they create infertile human beings? Well, first, they have a complement of only 22 chromosomes. Chromosome number and morphology is very important to the characteristics of the species. So what you can find is chromosomal rearrangements that were done by the Anunnaki, such as the fusion of 2 chromosomes into 1. But they probably also did not have the genetic material that produced fertile human beings. This chromosome was probably taken out of human in order to produce infertile human beings. And so using frequency, they could have them develop without that genetic element into fully developed adult beings, but incapable of reproduction. So now, the important part, again, is the 12-stranded DNA. So when they had the initial cloning, the human beings had the 12-stranded DNA. But the Anunnaki knew from their experience with the Homo erectus that a biological entity, a biological being that has a fully connected 12-stranded complex cannot be controlled because it's connected to higher dimensional levels, its higher self, and the information that it's receiving, it cannot be controlled. It creates its own reality, and as soon as it decides it's not going to work, be a slave in a gold mine, it doesn't have to anymore. Because through this higher frequency, it knows it creates all that it experiences. So the Anunnaki had to disconnect the 12-stranded matrix to make us only 2-stranded DNA beings. The 12 strands are still there. They're just disconnected. Now, how this is done is through rearrangement of the non-coding DNA. Again, I had already talked about how the non-coding DNA has things like ALU elements. What these do is, technically they're called mobile genetic elements. They're actually involved in rearranging the genome itself. So, again, these were utilized to disconnect that 12-stranded matrix. And so how this is done is, again, through frequency modulation. Even today, electromagnetic frequencies, X-rays, gamma rays, are what activate the non-coding DNA to rearrange. And, you know, it's very interesting that today there's highly increasing levels of cosmic radiation, which activate that DNA, causing it to rearrange. But so the Anunnaki disconnected these other 10 strands through rearranging the DNA. This caused a high degree of compartmentalization and fractionation of the molecule. What this does is it not only fractures the molecule and compartmentalizes it, it fractures us and compartmentalizes us. At the deepest level, we have been fractured and compartmentalized. We're compartmentalized physically, sociologically, spiritually. You know, we're compartmentalized. There's only this third dimensional reality. There's no other levels of reality. So we've been completely disconnected from that. And it happens at a molecular level, even mentally. So I actually have kind of a illustration of this. So this is a holofractal pattern. And we ourselves are holofractal. All of the universe is holofractal. But you even have 10 segments here, which you can think of as the 10 strands of DNA. But so what happened is, when they came, they disconnected these levels. So here you have this disconnection that occurs. This is at the molecular level, but so this is exactly what you see in the brain as well. The left and the right hemispheres. Fracturing the DNA not only fractured the DNA, it fractured our minds. But see, this was completely necessary in order to have a controllable species. Our minds became compartmentalized. But as soon as you cause this disconnection, it's a cascade. Now, at all levels, it begins to fracture. And you get this compartmentalization. I don't know how well this comes up, but it's compartmentalization and fracturing of the entire being. So, this all seems like pretty bad news for human beings, right? You know, we were, well, but it seems like bad news, but it's all part of a divine process. Nothing in it is really evil or nefarious in intent. It's all part of a divine process. If it was never done, human beings were never cloned in this way, we wouldn't even be here. But so it does seem, though, that even if we're completely compartmentalized and fractured at the molecular level, what hope do we have of spiritual evolution of consciousness? Well, the Anunnaki were not able to create a new species just purely through the physical manipulation of the DNA. It required higher levels. That's why most of the genetic engineering and orgenesis of species on the planet have been done by higher level intelligences. So there's actually the creation of Homo sapiens involved the Syrians as well. So this is a sixth-dimensional level of beings. So they're non-physical. But being non-physical, they can manipulate the morphogenetic field itself. And so ultimately, all manifest things in physical reality are the product of patterns, living four-dimensional patterns within the morphogenetic field. So it was the morphogenetic aspect in the creation of Homo sapiens that was done by the Syrians. Now, why would the Syrians be complicit in creating Homo sapiens, humans, if it was a, purely nefarious or evil undertaking? The Syrians knew the intent of the Anunnaki, but they also knew that this would be a highly valuable situation from a soul's perspective to have such a high degree of limitation. But so during the genetic engineering that took place on the DNA strand, the Syrians actually added an element that would allow us at the proper time to reconnect the 12-stranded complex. This element was silica. Is actually silica. Now, if you look at the Earth's crust, it's predominantly silica. And that's a crystalline form as well. And this is very important, that the crystalline nature of it is very important for being able to transduce those higher frequency vibrations from higher dimensional levels. But so it was added in there so that at the right time we could reconnect to that 12-stranded complex. And that's happening now. So if you look at the human body, more and more silicon is being incorporated in the human body. Even surgeons, when they're doing brain surgery, they're finding more silicon in the brain. But it's actually complexing to the double helix and forming a third strand. Now, I had said that all 12 strands are there, but most of them are energetic in nature. So we have the two physical strands, which correspond to, well, there's also a light encoded thing. And that corresponds to our third dimensional frequency domain. But as we shift and ascend to the fourth dimensional frequency domain, a fourth strand of DNA, or really a third physical strand of DNA, is beginning to manifest. Because that DNA strand corresponds to the dimensional shift that we're undergoing. So this silica DNA strand is forming, complexing to the double helix, and this will allow a 12-stranded DNA silicon matrix in which our 12 in addition to the formation of that silicon strand of DNA, it's also undergoing, as I had alluded to earlier, remodeling, genomic remodeling through those transposable elements of the DNA, and the higher the cosmic energy that is increasing at this time. So it's being reordered. The DNA is being reordered. The silicon is being reformed into the strand, and this will plug us back into the 12 strands of DNA, which will plug into the 12 chakras of the human system and allow us to have complete conscious expansion, awareness of the multiple dimensional levels. So, complete awareness of our higher self. The compartmentalization that we've experienced will be removed more and more as this occurs. So it's really a process of spiritual liberation as well. But this was planned from the beginning.
Now, yeah, this is a very hopeful perspective based on science. Now, let me ask you one question, and it's this: there is a group of families who refer to themselves as the Anunnaki Illuminati bloodline, and they have evolved into the monarchies and the Anunnaki Illuminati financial bloodlines and the monarchies. And they are the largest landowners on the planet, and they control the monetary systems and the gold. They worship God, gold, oil, and drugs. That's what they control, and they still kind of control us worker ants. And there's rumors that gold is still being exported off the planet, and they control humanity through multiple means of, gold, oil, and drugs and wars. Now, with this genetic upgrade into this 12 strand, in your opinion, and I realize that this is beyond genetics and more into political science, but what is going to happen to the Illuminati, to the Anunnaki Illuminati bloodlines and their control over human affairs that has been going on for 280,000 years?
Well, so actually, it can be addressed from a genetic perspective.
Okay.
Because the primary motivation for disconnecting and dismembering that 12-stranded matrix, the entire intent and motivation of that was to create a species that would be controllable. Because with that matrix intact, information from higher sources, higher dimensional frequencies are completely accessible. And the perspective of that species, of that being, is very different than if that is cut off. So if you can cut off that higher dimensional awareness, the species, the being becomes very controllable in that they are entirely focused consciously within the physical reality. So within the physical reality, if you have an overlord, you are completely at the whim of that overlord. This is the perspective from a completely physical focus of consciousness. Now, add in the reincorporation, the remembering of the 12-stranded DNA matrix. Now you have full access to that higher dimensional knowledge. You have higher frequency information coming into the being. Now they can see it for what it is. They realize that this overlord is only an overlord by their complacency. That they are the one that allows that relationship to even exist in the first place. There can be no dominance in that sense without the allowance of that being dominated. Right. So this is a major problem for the Illuminati, because those beings who choose to allow this process to occur and allow themselves to step into this larger being that they are, will quickly see that the only reason these bloodlines seem to have so much power is because we've given them
They've given all that power.
But as soon as you realize, I don't have to do that. I am the one that has, the power to create the reality that I prefer. There's no longer any kind of dominance that can be affected by the bloodlines. So as we move into a reality where more and more people have access to this perspective through the DNA, the information comes from the higher self, from even higher levels than that. Information comes in and it illuminates our perspective, giving us a much broader view, not so, myopic, not so compartmentalized. And so, we throw off the shackles that we put on ourselves.
Right. Now, this kind of ties in with some questions actually that people have written in and want to know and have asked me to ask you, which is, now that we know we're in this process of reactivating from our 2 or 3 strand back up to our 12, what can we do as individuals to empower this process?
So the way that the 12-stranded complex, the 12-stranded matrix was disconnected was through that traumatic rearrangement of the genome. So that is a process that was done through frequency modulation. Now, over many, many millennia, it's been exacerbated. We have exacerbated the process of this disconnection through vibrating with the frequency of fear. Throughout what we see is our historical past, there's been trauma after trauma after trauma on a global level for the human species. It has been that we have created. Of course, there's extraterrestrial influences as well, but those go both ways. That trying to help, trying to create more problems for us, etc. But largely, we have chosen to vibrate with the frequency of fear. So here again is that frequency modulation. The frequency of fear, that trauma, has further made the linear arrangement of the DNA decoherent, or I should say incoherent. The process that we can undergo now is vibrating with a frequency that, as the DNA reorders, and it's happening for everybody regardless, because of the increased cosmic radiation, the increasing frequency as we shift dimensional levels. It's happening anyways. But if you can vibrate with the frequency of love, that is a very cohesive and ordering frequency. And it will arrange the DNA in a coherent manner. So before it was completely incoherent. It was like you had a stack of books scattered all over the place. In fact, a library. And this is very apropos because our DNA is a library. Not only does it carry the vibration of our ancestors, because all that information is going through the DNA. Every experience we have, the reason we experience it is because it comes through the DNA, through the light-encoded filament to our conscious awareness, which is not physical. It's not within the physical body. But so every experience we have is recorded vibrationally within the DNA. It's a library. But right now, it's like a jumble of books on the floor. You can't find the book you're looking for. But as it becomes reordered, the information becomes accessible. The information about our past. You have the ancestral memory from the cellular memory can now be accessed. And you know, then as well as higher levels of understanding, you know, remembering past lives, etc., which comes from reconnecting with those energetic strands of DNA. But vibrating with the frequency of joy, happiness, and love is the way that this is done. Really, it's happening automatically. All you have to do is sit back and allow it to happen. It was predestined to occur. The only way that it can be impeded is by following the Illuminati agenda, which is, you know, focusing on these fear-based agendas, keeping yourself in a state of stress. You know, you have to keep yourself centered, focused, and vibrate, resonate with that frequency of joy, love, and excitement, because that's your true self. That is who you really are, is in existence.
Finally, could you share with us what your emotions and kind of maybe some aha moments were as you experienced actually being there at Adam's calendar?
I would say initially what hit me was the feeling of otherworldliness when we first came to Adam's calendar. I don't know if it was because it was cloaked in mist, if you remember, but I can sense the vibration of a place very acutely. And I felt at that place the feeling of that otherworldliness, perhaps because it was constructed by an extraterrestrial race, but also I could feel it as a very spiritual experience, because we come full circle. It was our point of origin, and now we had come back, and it was a new point of origin for a new birth of humanity. And I could feel it as a very spiritual process. It was almost like I was in between dimensions myself. But some other aha moments was that, wow, this is an actual place that is very ancient. That much was obvious. You know, Michael Tellinger had said, you know, the antiquity of the region being in excess of 200,000 years. But when I was there, I could feel that. It felt like a very ancient location. The other largest one was the realization that those complexes that we visited were not habitations. Up until that point, I thought they were largely homes, you know, dwellings perhaps for the worker race, for the slaves. But when I got there, and you know, I saw more of the evidence and research and got to see it firsthand. I mean, it was like I was blown away, really, to realize that that is a facility. It's a gigantic facility that used this highly advanced technology of acoustic frequency modulation. There's tools all over the place, and all of them are sound tools. It's just amazing, especially the size of it. It's just vast. You know, millions of stone circles. It really, at this point, boggles the mind exactly what was being done at that site.
So, Funny, what do you think? What do you think that you, as a geneticist, and genetics as a science in general, will contribute to the liberation of humanity in the future?
Well, given the central role that DNA plays in the evolution of consciousness or in conscious awareness, because really the evolution of consciousness is primarily elicited from consciousness itself. Any kind of changes in DNA or the physical environment is just a reflection of the changes in consciousness that are already occurring. So even this remembering, this reformation of the 12-stranded DNA silicate matrix, it's just a reflection of our own decision at a soul level to begin the next step in our evolutionary process. But understanding the key role, the role that DNA plays in this process can greatly facilitate anybody's progress within their own conscious evolution. I guess I can say that from my own experience, understanding the dynamics that DNA actually plays, that genetics play within this expansion of consciousness, it has facilitated my own progress spiritually. But there are many technical aspects as well that could be mentioned, and that cloning is becoming a very real application for humanity. So right now, we are faced with the question of how do we want to use cloning? How do we want to utilize this technology? Now, cloning has been used to produce a vast number of species that exist on this planet right now. It was used to create us and all the different types of humans that you see. So cloning is really a natural process. It even actually occurs naturally through asexual reproduction. But really, we're faced with the question, how do we want to utilize cloning? Do we want to utilize this technology like the Anunnaki did? Because that is a very pertinent question, I think. It, allowed the creation of a species that was able to undergo their own evolutionary process and become hopefully fully conscious entities and beings. That could be regarded as a kind of even admirable thing to do. And so, do we want to use this technology for the creation of new species? Do we want to use it to enhance ourselves? I mean, you could have a geometric increase in the capabilities of humans through genetic engineering. Is that something that we want to pursue? Or is perhaps it more sagacious to just allow the natural process to occur and, wait till we're at a higher level of frequency to make those kind of, decisions and choices. But so, I see it as playing a very critical role in the future.
Very good. Well, William, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being an emerging voice that bridges the worlds of genetics, spirituality, and ethics.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share these perspectives and any information that I've gleaned. So thank you very much.
And our best for the year 2012.
Indeed. Happy New Year. 2012.